Hey friends, welcome back to the Reach More podcast. We are excited to talk to you today about prayer. So in each of our interviews with people, we've realized that prayer consistently comes up as one of the key things. And so we wanted to take time to talk about ways that we can assess ourselves in our prayer lives and ask, okay, how is this going? How could it be better so that we can be better disciples and followers of the Lord Jesus? So in this episode, we are going to dive deeply into that and give you some ideas for ways that you could assess your own spiritual life and how your prayer experience is, your relationship with the Lord, and concrete steps that you can take to make that better. So what do you say, Monty?
Hello. I'm so excited to talk about this. And if we're being honest, I think it's one of those topics that people automatically, if you're like me, roll your eyes at. You're like, oh, we're talking about prayer again. But it's kind of important, right? It's like something that's so essential and so crucial. And honestly, I think even the Pope has to figure out how to make sure he has time for prayer. So
Oh, yeah,
it's a thing that
absolutely.
is so crucial. And so if you're listening and you're like, oh man, do I really want to listen to this? I think you do, because all of us can improve and all of us can grow in this topic, including myself.
Absolutely. Definitely. It's one of those things that it's so basic and so fundamental that it's easy to ignore.
Hmm.
But when you do ignore it, then that's when you start to see like catastrophic problems
Yeah.
in your own life. And I mean, just like with any relationship, if you ignored the fundamentals, that relationship goes away.
Hmm.
And like health, if you ignore the fundamentals of health, like you can do all the exercise and healthy eating you want. If you're not sleeping, you're wasting your time.
Hmm.
And the prayer is one of those same things. And so one of my favorite quotes is, people are less in need of instruction than they are of reminder. And so
Mm.
this might be the kind of thing that everybody already knows. And so we will just do the humble work of reminding ourselves and one another that prayer is important. And it's not just important, it's like the stuff that is our relationship with God. Like we're really, what we're doing when we evangelize is expressing our love for Jesus. And so we don't want to lose the main point here. Main point is intimacy and in love and union with the Lord. And that's what we get in prayer.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So I wanted to talk about some ways that we could practice a self-assessment here. And a couple things come to mind. We can, when we're stepping back to ask ourselves, okay, how is prayer going? And we might do this really just as a kind of a routine checkup. The things that stand out, we want to look at our experience. Is
Hmm.
it good? Is it bad? The traditional terms there would be: am I experiencing consolation or desolation?
Hmm.
Good or bad probably is like, that's not because it's not up to us. So,
Right.
but hard, easy, distracted, those kind of things. There's consistency. So there's regular, consistent. Yeah, I'm able to do what I think the Lord is calling me to. Um, then there's like, okay, sometimes I do it, and not at all, but I would like to. And
Hmm.
then the depth and how much we are staying focused and concentrated in prayer, which again is not necessarily up to us, but it's just something to be aware of. Can you think of anything else?
Yeah, I think it is a thing of, the aspect of reminder that you mentioned, just like every single day or every week, like how am I doing with my prayer life? My best friend and I do check-ins every week. I've probably mentioned this. So we talk about how we're doing mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And oftentimes it's when we get to the spiritually that I'm like, oh man, my prayer life was not good this week. Or
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
hey, I went to adoration 3 times this week. I did awesome. And so it is funny that like when we started doing check-ins probably a year ago. And it's been something that has been a thing of reminder and something that has helped me. And so I think oftentimes this self check-in, it's not something that you're like, I'm going to check it every time I go on a retreat. Because when you go on a retreat, you're like, oh, this is great. But how can we do daily or weekly check-in of how am I doing spiritually and what are those areas that I want to improve? And yeah, kind of make up a plan and maybe tell someone else. So she's also my accountability partner. So I'll be like, my goal is to do this week, and we check in on each other because it seems easy, but it's not, right? Because
yeah.
I have a giant to do list and a list of 20 something emails that are staring at me right now as I'm talking to you, and it gets stressful. And you're like, well, how am I gonna take 10 minutes of prayer when I have so many emails to respond to? And recognizing, well, if I go out of order, I'm gonna get more stressed and my anxiety is gonna go up. and it's going to be worse, which I'm not going to lie, happens often. So we just want to make sure that we're on the same page here and that we're doing the best that we can to do that. And that's why that self-assessment is going to be a big part of it.
Yeah, that it's very easy to let that go, let prayer go, because no one's going to yell at you if you don't pray on time.
Mhm.
But you know, if you don't email somebody, if you don't finish a project, somebody's going to get in touch with you and say like, "Hey, I need this," and there's consequences, and we don't feel the consequences of not praying
Mhm.
immediately. It's delayed. Um,
Mhm.
but it's I mean, one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest one. And the consequence is going to be our relationship with the Lord is
Mhm.
going to diminish, and I don't think
Mhm.
that's what any of us want. Um,
And then
and
everything else diminishes after that, right? Like
yeah, our
all
ability to
aspects.
witness, our
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, one way that I think people could help, or one thing that they could do to help get an understanding of a realistic expectation for prayer is I'm going to borrow this from my wife. She designs this for in work with like groups, helping people learn balance in their life so that they don't get burned out. Is called a nourishing and depleting exercise, and you could take up a sheet of paper and you could draw a column down the middle of it, and on one hand you write nourishing, and the other you write depleting, and you go through your day and list all of the activities that you would do. Even, I mean, like saying, brushing teeth and flossing. And like flossing is probably depleting for most people. Um, and an estimate of how much time. It can be a little tedious at first to do this, but so give yourself, more than 5 minutes, more than 10 minutes, probably 15 to 20 minutes to do this well, if not a little longer. And after you've gone through your whole day, and you might have to think of multiple days, like a Monday is going to look different than a Friday, and definitely different than a Saturday or a Sunday.
Mhm.
Next to each of those um, items, um, you could say, uh, is this essential? So you've got in the um, I think I didn't set this up properly. So you don't do the columns first. Just do your list, right? Do your list, write your items in
And
order.
then place them.
Yeah, then you place them in nourishing or depleting. And there's going to be some things that are depleting, and you just have to do. But for the things that are depleting for you, and you can get rid of them, those are kind of the easy windfalls. You say like, well, why am I doing this if it doesn't make me happier, if it doesn't help me fulfill my state in life more? And that can be something that we trade for prayer.
Mm.
And that can also help us see like, all right, um, how much time do I actually have? You could do that and realize like, oh, there's 24 hours in the day and I have 26 hours accounted for.
Mhm.
That's a time where we like, whether you can do it immediately or later, we have to say, let's get rid of some stuff to build in time, not just for prayer,
Yeah.
but for all of the other things that are essential.
And I like that because it's also a good assessment of your life. So, like, if you're making the list and everything that has to do with your job is depleting, maybe that's a time to reassess it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so just to kind of see, and maybe areas of family, like, it is good to kind of, I like that because it kind of organizes it. And
Hmm.
if prayer is a part of it, it'll help you kind of figure out what to do once you figure those steps out.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Um, so when we find prayer difficult in terms of like we're distracted, or it's hard to focus, or it's hard to make ourselves aware of God's presence, so maybe we're experiencing some desolation. um, what's some of the best advice you've received, or what are the things you do?
I have a very I have a very interesting relationship with Jesus. I often think if anyone ever heard the way that me and Jesus talk, I think they would be concerned. You know how they say, like, you should talk to Jesus like he's your best friend? Like, I
Yeah,
really do.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and, like, sometimes so the other day, I had one of my friends diagnosed with, like, an inoperable brain tumor, and I was very frustrated, and so I'll, like, give Jesus the silent treatment for a few days and not talk to him, and it's, like, really bad and not good, but I'll look at him and be like, "Lord, I just need a minute," and then I had to prepare something for ministry, so I walked into adoration, I was like, "I can't even ignore you for 2 days," like it's just very real. So if
Yeah.
I'm in a part of desolation, like I'm upfront with him about that and I'm like, I'm upset with you and this is hard and I don't want to talk to you, but I'm here because I know I need you. So we're here. So I think the best thing to do in moments of desolation for me, again, I'm just, me. I'm very honest with the Lord about, like, man, like, like, "Where are you at, Lord? Like, where are you at and what's going on?" And, "Hi, did you remember me? Like, your daughter, Madi, 5'10", I'll be super sarcastic with Jesus, which is not good because sarcasm means tearing of the flesh, so don't be sarcastic. But, it's a thing of just, like, in moments of desolation, kinda recognizing this is where I'm at and
Yeah.
being upfront with my friends of this is where I'm at because there was a moment in my life that when I was in desolation, I would just shut down
Mhm.
and I would not talk to anyone. And I would pretend and I'd put a smile and how are you doing? Oh, great. God is so, and that was not great at all because then I was not well and no one knew it. And I was not facing and being authentic with what I was thinking or feeling with the Lord. So I think the best thing that has helped me now is being upfront and checking in with my accountability people and talking to my spiritual director and my counselor of like, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm doing. And those things really have been really beneficial for moments of desolation and consistency. So like I may not want to go see Jesus in adoration, but I will force myself to go see Jesus in adoration and just be present to the best that I can be.
What I like about that is um, you're not ignoring the elephant in the room, right?
Mhm.
You don't go into prayer and say, "Well, today is, I'm supposed to do this in prayer today. I'm supposed to read this
Mhm.
much scripture or this chapter in this book, or I'm going to say these prayers, no matter how distracted I am," right? And so you could
Mhm.
just kind of white knuckle it and go through that whole process and end up having like a very distracted time in prayer where like you might actually have a very difficult time with that, and it wouldn't be you probably walk away just as frustrated as when you went into it.
Mhm.
And instead you're saying like, now's the time to talk about this stuff. And so it reminds me of some great advice I received in prayer, which was, if you're distracted, pray about the distractions,
Yep.
right? And maybe,
Oh yeah.
if you find yourself thinking of baseball during prayer, like that might not be the thing to bring to prayer, but it could be like the sense that, or the fact that you're distracted on its own, or that you're having a hard time focusing, and you could
Yeah.
simply turn to the Lord and say like, Lord, I'm distracted right now, can you help me
Mhm.
understand why? Like, is this um
Mhm.
if I feel bored, why? Is
Mhm.
it because, I'm not bringing my best self? Is there something that I really should be talking to you about, that I want to
Mhm.
talk to you about, but maybe I'm not? And I remember hearing a psychologist say one time that um, if you feel bored with people in session, it's because they're not talking to you about what they really care about.
Mm.
Because when they're talking about what matters to them, it's fascinating.
Oh,
And
that's good.
yeah, I think that
I
prayer
like
is the
that.
same way, right? So if prayer is boring, that might be a sign that we're talking to God about the wrong stuff.
Mhm. And
Um,
that's funny you said that because I mean, everyone that knows me knows that I love food, and I get distracted oftentimes with food. And I one time, I was so hungry in adoration, like, I was so hungry, and someone told me, like, "Bring your distractions to the Lord." I ended up having, like, a full hour, like, adoration talking about food and, like, but, I'm telling you, like, a deep dive of, like, the digestive system and why food is so good and taste buds, and God, you're so good that you created us taste buds so that we can enjoy food, and it was, like, it was one of my favorite adorations I've ever had because
that's funny.
in the like, I am really passionate when I talk about food, and I was sharing that with the Lord and recognizing that one of the things that I'm most passionate about, like, the Lord loves me so much that He gave it to me, and He loves it so much that He becomes present in it through the Eucharist. So it was just like, yeah, sometimes really random distractions and really random I've had prayer time where, like, secular music comes up, not horrible ones, but, like, there's, like, okay secular music,
Right,
and
right.
I've, like, had deep dive of prayer, just, like, analyzing the words and why is this coming up, so, yeah, I just wanna affirm that it is good to kinda bring those things to the Lord.
That sounds like a psalm, like your focus on prayer. Like I could imagine there being a psalm of somebody just like praising the
I
goodness of God for all things in food.
I would totally write that. I would You know what? I think I will. Okay,
Go for
thanks,
it. There
Dan.
you go. Yeah, I mean, you think of, what is it, the canticle from Daniel that's in the liturgy of the
Yeah.
hours? At first, I couldn't stand it. It was so long. It's like all of these things, like, okay, birds and fish and dolphins and
Dolphins
frost
and
and
water
dew, and it's like,
creatures,
oh
bless
my
the
goodness,
Lord.
when are we going to get over it? And then eventually, I stopped and learned to enjoy it, and
Mhm.
was just kind of like basking in God's goodness as I thought about all those things. And so,
That's
um,
awesome. Yeah,
yeah,
love that.
um, the this is worth bringing up, right? Um, how important do you think a spiritual director is?
I think they're very important. Um, I I'm gonna be honest, I think I had one when I was at Franciscan, and then I left, and then I was like, "Okay, Jesus, like, you're gonna show me who my spiritual director is." And I was kind of expecting, like, clouds to open up and like a light to shine on this one person. And it was going to be like, this is your spiritual director, Mari. Like, speak to him, like baptism of Jesus style. And it wasn't like that. And finally, I mean, I went for like 5 or 6 years not having a spiritual director and constantly talking about like, I really need a spiritual director and I'm going to get a spiritual director and it was like not good. And then finally being like, you know what? I'm going to make a decision. And I was going to confess her the consistently to someone, and he's been wonderful. And I would say that a spiritual director is very important, to kind of talk things out and to kind of guide you on next steps. And I'm not gonna say that like you can't have a great prayer life without a spiritual director, because you can, and that's not what I'm saying. But it is
Yeah,
good
yeah.
to have someone that can also recognize things in your life. So if they've been with you for multiple years, they can be like, well, with this connects to this, and this is also showing XYZ. And so it is kind of cool to just be able to recognize that. So I think spiritual directors are very important. And a lot of people are like, well, we don't have people in the area, or I don't know who to reach out to, or whatever. You can just start with, asking local priests if they know someone or if they're available. And honestly, the same thing as a counselor, right? Just because you met with them once doesn't mean you have to stick with them. So if you
Right.
have to, I was just talking to Dan before about how I probably have to fire my counselor. So it's just like a thing of, it's okay. Like you can always discern to move to someone else.
Yeah.
But just kind of making those steps. So spiritual director, highly encourage and suggest.
What do you think is a good frequency? Like once a month?
I do once a month.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's
Um,
mine. I don't know. What do you do?
I like once a month.
Yeah, I
I would
like
say,
one.
no less than once every 6 weeks, because then you don't go so far that you have forgotten what you want to talk about, and
Mhm,
there's still kind of like enough time in between to spend more time in prayer, to learn, to grow, and then bring stuff back.
Yep, agreed. Agreed.
Um, I know, like, I've never paid for a spiritual director. I know there are some people out there. I think, especially as more lay people get trained in this and certified, there's going to be people who charge because it's a legitimate service. So, any thoughts on like what would be, I guess, how, like, if people
I
are uncomfortable paying for that?
I don't know. I haven't ever paid for a spiritual director. I kind of see it though.
Yeah.
Like I don't. I understand. Um, I mean, depends. Like if they're lay people and they do have to go through a bunch of training. I have friends that are going through the training now. It takes multiple years. Like it is a thing.
Hmm.
So maybe like a offering, would
Yeah.
be okay. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. And again, if you can't afford it, there's probably someone who does it for free. Like,
True.
there's clergy in your area. Retired clergy kind of come to mind. They don't have a lot of responsibilities, and that might be
Yeah.
the kind of thing that after years of ministry, they have a lot of
Yeah.
wisdom
And
to help
religious
guide you.
sisters are awesome as well.
Yeah,
They're
if you're
awesome.
lucky enough to have them close.
Yeah, true. True that. True that.
So one of the most challenging things, though, is starting a habit. Um, and I think the difficulty can be, we often say, well, I think a good prayer life should be this. And so we have this, like, the difficult language of should, right? But the church doesn't actually give us like a minimum of how
Mhm.
much we should pray every day. So
Mhm.
it's kind of
Mhm.
that's a whole nother question itself to think about. Like, why do we think there's a should there, like a responsibility to pray a certain amount?
Yeah.
And that could be unhealthy. Like, there could be a sense of pride or spiritual scrupulosity or some kind of neuroticism. Um, I have found, I'd love to hear what you do to establish good prayer habits. I have found, especially when I've fallen out of the habit of praying daily, that the best way for me to build that back up again is to start with the smallest, simplest amount of time that I just can't give myself an excuse for not doing.
Mhm.
And there have been, especially like I've gone into Lent a couple times where I haven't been praying daily on a consistent basis. And I tell myself, like, okay, I am literally going to set a timer for 1 minute and I'm going to pray for 1 minute. And I
Mhm.
do that for the first week. And then I
Mhm.
double it, which means by the time Lent is over, I'm actually
Mhm.
praying like 2 to the 6th power minutes every day, which is
Mhm.
like, that's pretty good.
Mhm.
Um, and so I guess I want to give people permission. If that's where you are, there's nothing embarrassing with praying for 1 minute. And
Mhm.
if that's how you can establish a habit, um, more power to you. Like, you will
Mhm.
not regret that time. Do you have any additional thoughts on that, Marty, of how to establish a good prayer routine?
Yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that I have the perfect prayer routine because I don't, and I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that I have a consistency in prayer because you know what, I don't. So I'm just gonna be 100% honest
Yeah,
on
yeah.
that. Like,
Hmm.
I think it's hard, especially when you're in ministry. I'll speak for myself. Like, I pray with every single call,
Yeah, yeah.
so it's like, oh, I gotta pray, but it's like, oh no, 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 that doesn't count for my prayer time with the Lord, right? So, um, I associate certain times and spaces for prayer. So this might sound weird, but the shower is a time that is like my time that I'm not on the phone, I'm not watching anything, and like every single day when I'm showering, I know that I'm going to have prayer time.
Yeah.
Like that is consistent. So for sure that, and I shower every day. So like, and it's at night, so it's like recap of the day, and I always start with like, okay, Lord, like how am I doing? And that's like, and then I answer that question with the Lord, like, every single day in the shower, which maybe sounds weird, but you know what? It's a great place. So that is consistent. That's my consistency. And then I try to make it to adoration a few times a week.
Hmm.
Um, and I want to make sure, I, for me personally, when I have to be planning talks or planning whatever, I want to make sure that I have prayer time that's not planning anything. That's just
Yeah.
me and Jesus, just
Hmm.
me and Jesus talking about things. And so those things are consistent. It's my Jesus year. I've been trying to do 33 minutes a day of my Jesus year. And I've had times that I do that and I have times that I don't, but I try to at least do 3 minutes. You know what I mean? So just like coming up with things like my closet, I put a pillow on the floor, I sit on my closet and I pray. So just coming up with little things that are going to help you. And some days, because I could say, well, every day I'm going to do this, but you know what? I travel a lot and it's really hard. But when I'm on planes, I always have really good prayer time. So I think, long story short, you should have consistency and you should say, I'm going to pray every morning. It's going to be the first thing that I do for 10, 15 minutes, etc. But if you're like me, I don't function in the mornings and mornings are horrible. No one wants to talk to me in the mornings. Like, so figure out a time that works for you, figure out a space that works for you, be kind to yourself, like you were saying. And if that means a minute, like, congratulations, you did a minute. Like, that's awesome, right?
Yeah.
And try, I would say, I think it is important at least once a week to really be intentional about like 30 minutes or 33 minutes in my
Yeah.
case,
Yeah.
like at least once a week, because man, it's important. And I mean, talk about any relationship. Okay, prayer is a relationship with the Lord, right? Like lifting our hearts to Jesus. If you're not talking to him, you're not really having a relationship with him. And you guys are not super great. You're more like acquaintances. And you don't want to be an acquaintance with God of the universe, the
No.
lover of your soul, the one that gave you everything you own, right? Like, you want to be more than acquaintance. So we got to define the relationship that we have with Jesus. And if we're serious about the relationship that we're saying that we have with Jesus, we're going to have to talk to him. The end.
Amen. Yeah, that's. Um, I think we should open up a little safe space here for if you're a caretaker for anybody, especially small children. It might be unrealistic to pray the same time every single day.
Hmm.
Um, and like, can you always get up earlier? Yes. But sometimes you're not in control of how much sleep you got or you get. And they might be up, they might be, and if you're a caretaker, you are, you're being the hands and feet of Jesus to someone else. And I'm not saying don't pray, but what I am saying is, be kind to yourself and like, what does the Lord want? Does he want the time of day, or does he want to be in relationship with you? And the reality is he wants to be in relationship with you. and when that time comes is flexible.
Mhm.
And so, like, I love having a routine. I love having a schedule. Um, but with the, family life, that's harder for me to do.
Mhm.
And I have to be flexible enough to say, you know what, I'm gonna I'm gonna move other stuff around in my schedule as needed to make sure I pray, rather than being so rigid and saying to my wife and 5-year-old, like, oh, sorry, you don't get my time right now because
Mhm.
this is my scheduled prayer time, when I could
Mhm.
easily spend time with them and pray later and move something else that's
Yeah.
less important than both prayer and my family.
Mhm. Yeah.
So this a topic that I love, and this is, I think, something that will hopefully become a really appreciated topic and idea that we can give more resources for people on later. But it's something called the Institute for Domestic Church Life, and specifically for families. Um, this was put out in collaboration between Dr. Greg Popchak, who is a kind of a well-known and well-written Catholic psychologist and author and speaker, and the Holy Cross Fathers and their institute, the Peyton Institute for Domestic Church Life, who's named after Father, I want to say it's Father Walter Peyton,
Mhm.
who's well known for, I think he was the one who coined the phrase, the family that prays together stays together.
Yes.
Um, but they've done some really awesome work in what they call the domestic liturgy. And I won't, we don't need to spend an hour on it now. But the big idea behind this, it came out of a search for an authentic model um, of holiness that fits with family life, like a model
Mhm.
of holiness that's for the laity, that's not based on uh, the clerical state, it's not based on monasticism,
Mhm.
but it fits with, let's say, like the married state or being in the world. And they had this really cool idea that if there's a domestic church, which the church affirms, then there's a domestic liturgy. And if there's a domestic liturgy, then there's rites to that liturgy. And
Mm.
the way we celebrate those rites is an authentic form of prayer, in as much as we are knowingly or kind of intentionally doing so. So if you think about going to the liturgy, there's rites. There's the penitential rite,
Mhm.
there's the liturgy of the word, there's the presentation of the gifts, there's the whole Eucharistic prayer. All of those things are essential components within the liturgy, and we can either be like aware of what we're doing or not. And when we're aware of them, then that's a beautiful prayer. And when we're not aware of them, it's still good to go to mass. Like, we're going to be distracted. And uh, these three rites are the rite of relationships, the rite of rituals, and the rite of reaching out.
Mm.
And they really encompass all of human life.
Mhm.
And just briefly, here's why these are real prayers and real expressions of our relationship with God.
Mhm.
Um, so the rite of relationships that's when we embody the love of the Father towards the people in our family, and so that has to do with, especially for parents, the way they raise their children and the way they interact with one another as spouses. For friends who are living together, or for people who are living and practicing hospitality towards their neighbors, towards their friends, it's the way we respond to the way we greet people, and these say to other people, by the way we live, who God is and what's true about his love.
Mm.
And they, especially within a family context, right? If you love the people you're with, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you can enjoy it.
Mhm.
If you don't like the people you're with, everything you do can be miserable. Even, going to Disney World. If you go to Disney World with your mortal enemy, it's going to be hard to have fun.
You're
Um,
not wrong.
Yeah. And so the idea here is, if you focus on your relationships with people and make sure those are an expression of God's love and they affirm the goodness of the other, that sets the foundation.
Mm.
And then the next rite, the rite of rituals, is there's four rituals that encompass everything we do in a day. We work, we talk, we play, and we pray with one another. And everything you do falls into one or both of those categories.
Mhm.
And so the idea with this is, you can do those unintentionally. You can say, I'm going to do the dishes, you clean the bathroom, John, you clean the whatever. Or you could do this intentionally. You could say, okay,
Mhm.
as a family, we take care of each other. we're going to do these things together.
Yeah.
And that transforms toil and labor into work that has dignity.
Mhm.
Um, for play, it's like taking time with people to say, like, I value you enough to give you my most valuable resource, my time.
Mm.
Talking with people says, like, I care about your heart.
Mhm.
And then prayer, of course, it's the easy one. But I like to, when I talk about this with people, I like to say, like, you could go to mass every day. You could go to adoration after that. You could pray the rosary. You could go to confession. You could pray liturgy of the hours, right? And let's say that takes you 4 hours. Well, you're
Yeah.
awake for 16. So what are you doing for the other 12 hours of the day
Mhm.
that are an expression of holiness and of God's love?
Mhm.
And these
Mhm.
are all those things that fill in that time. And
Mm.
so, if we could pray well, but if we're not loving in our relationships and in our work and our talk and our play, then we're missing a huge opportunity. And
Yep.
so, I wanted to bring this up as really a way of lifting the burden off of people to make
Mhm.
them feel like, so friends, if you're thinking like, well, how do I do all of these things? How do I pray more? How do I spend more time with my family? Um, the spending time with your family, I don't want to just kind of like wish away this idea and say like, oh, well, your work is your prayer, but work is a prayer. And,
Mhm.
like playing with your children can be a prayer, can be a gift back to God.
Mhm.
And so, these are our callings, our state in life. And so
Yep.
if we're saying like, well, I have to pray so that I can do these things, like we also have to do these things.
Mhm.
And they can be just as authentic an expression of our love for God as anything else.
That's what I love because we talk about apostolate, we talk about secularization of the laity and all these different things. Like it's pretty much you don't just be a Catholic when you're at church. It's you have to be a Catholic at every single parts. And I
Yeah.
think the same thing goes with prayer, right? It's not just like pray when you're in church or pray when you're in adoration. Like pray when you're driving and you someone
Yeah.
cuts
Yeah.
you off and you wanna not be nice, like, pray for them, right? Like, pray when you're playing with your kids, pray when you're doing dishes, pray when you're vacuuming, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it is a goal, and I know that, I think it was Mother Teresa, like, she talks about, like, make everything a prayer, or, do small things with great love, but it really is, like, if you're so in tune and you are focusing your relationship with the Lord, then He's brought into everything that you do. And so that doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect. Doesn't mean you're going to not mess up because you will. But when you do, it's just recognizing, okay, Lord, like, sorry about that, right? Like,
Right.
help me focus and help me be better. So
Amen.
don't put your prayer life in a box, is what I'm trying to say.
There we
Yeah.
go. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up.
Hmm.
So, friends, we hope this encourages you. You can start anywhere to improve your prayer life, and the Lord, He wants you. He loves you. You are the single most important thing in your life to Him, and your work, with the things you create, the things you do with your time, those matter to Him. But you matter the most, and He wants to know you and love you, and He wants you to know Him and love Him. And so we hope that today is the start of a renewed prayer life where you spend more and richer time with our Lord in intimate conversation. So count on our prayers for you as you embark on that journey. And we can't wait to be with you for our next one.
God bless everyone.
Bye. Hey, friends, I hope you enjoyed our conversation on prayer, how you can do a little self assessment, how you can establish good routines, how to be kind and gentle with yourself in assessing your own prayer habits, and what to look for in a spiritual director, and how to really pray in the home and offer up everything as a prayer to God more. So, I think a good challenge for this week for all of us would be to ask the Lord how we can grow in prayer. What's the next step? Does it mean more time? Does it mean maybe surrendering more to Him? Don't know why that word was hard to say, but surrendering more to Him in prayer, being authentic and talking with Him as a friend about the things that really matter to us. And that's going to be different for every one of us. So hope that this podcast was helpful for you. And next week, we will be back with a new episode that is another interview again. So look forward to presenting that to you. Until then, count on our prayers. God bless you, and can't wait to see you again.